Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sayed Hasibasan, and this is my first ever live stream. And in today's live stream, what I wanted to discuss was one of the topics that is surrounding the automotive industry, the Nexperia crisis, and what does it mean for the broader automotive industry? What sort of things that we can expect in the coming days? And also, what does it mean for the future trends when it comes to expansion of Chinese OEMs in Europe? So, right off the bat, what I would like to do is just try to give as much as value in this presentation. And I've prepared a slide deck. I wrote an article as well, but just a short introduction. Who am I? My name is Sayed Hasib Hassan. And I've been working in the automotive sector, let's say, for about 9 years in Germany. The first 5 years, I was much more responsible on the internal combustion engine components. So I was working at a tier one suppliers. I had the pleasure and I had the privilege to work with, let's say, global OEMs, including General Motors, Toyota, Honda, Opel, and McLaren. And during the last 4 years, I was working in the e-mobility sector, working at, for example, at ABB. And over here, I was responsible for selling the fast charging infrastructure. And I've had the privilege to work across the industry. And today I thought, let's break it down. What does it mean for Nexperia? So, the first thing, what I want to start is honestly, I have to say, I've been working in the industry, but I did not really know about Nexperia. So, there was always a brand name NXP, and I thought that means Nexperia. Turns out it isn't. And I'm going to show you what Nexperia significance is, how their market share looks like, where they have been producing their products. And in terms of broader automotive industry, the the geopolitics has played an important role in almost breaking down the automotive supply chain. Let me show. So, what do I mean by that? So we are, in my opinion, we are going towards an era after the corona pandemic where we will be seeing the largest automotive stoppages. So without further ado, so let's start. The first thing I wanted to understand, as I mentioned, what is Nexperia? What is their global importance? What are the political actors which brought this complete industry to a halt? And what are the future implications? So right off the bat, who is Nexperia? So Nexperia is this part of semiconductors, but when we use the word semiconductor, it could mean a lot of things. And in terms of Nexperia, we are not talking about the complex AI chips or the very extreme modern AI chips. What we are talking about over here is the plumbing of, let's say, semiconductors. They are really cheap but quite essential components that are required everywhere. I'm talking about diodes, transistors, MOSFETs. So I've taken some screenshots what sort of products they are offering. So they are small, they are cheap, and in and indispensable. Where are they operating in the automotive sector? They are absolutely everywhere. You cannot think about an automotive without thinking they are not being present over there. Talk about safety and comfort. So they are present in ADAS, they are present in LiDARs, radars. If you talk about air conditioning, HVAC, lighting, airbags, and even the braking, and also the ECUs. Talk about power and propulsion for the EVs, let's say battery management systems, inverters, onboard chargers, as well as the DC-DC converters. And finally, about the control systems. So they are, as I mentioned, in ECUs, cooling fans, fuel and fluid pumps, as well as in vehicle networks. So this is what is the core industry of Nexperia looks like. Now let's look at their scale and the reach. So how many employees does Nexperia has? They have around 12,400 employees worldwide across Europe, Asia, and US. And the revenue that they generated last year was 2.06 billion. Um, it's not euro, it's actually dollar. So what about their global footprint? So they have multiple sites. So in total, they have 31 sites and they are across Let's say, so they have divided their sites across sales, R&D. Also, they have water fab production, assembly, and their headquarters. So in total, we are talking about 31 sites. How about the manufacturing locations? In total, they have 6 manufacturing locations. The assembly lines are located, all of them in Asia, but there are 2 sites where they are producing water fab, for example, and it is based in Germany, Hamburg, as well as in UK, Manchester. But they are producing the water fabs over there, and but they are producing the wafer fabs, sorry, over there, and they are then essentially shipped to China for the packaging and assembly into the final products. What does their business model look like? So the business model they have is like 80% of their capacity, or 80% of the production that they are doing is coming out of China, and that generates 48% of their revenue. Talking about their share volume, so they are delivering nearly 110 billion chips per year. And the global market share when it comes to automotive industry, when it comes to the discrete segment of semiconductors, let's say transistor and diodes, it's 40%. So let's look at the evolution of their ownerships from Philips all the way to Wingtech. First part is, if you look at their webpage, so from 1920s onwards, so Philips basically acquired that time Muller and Velvo. That was basically the origins. And after nearly a century, so they spun off their semiconductors branch, and it became what we know as NXP, what I also mentioned earlier. But that was the year 2006. So NXP was doing pretty fine, and by 2017, they also sold off their standard product divisions. And this was another spin-off, and this was then acquired by Chinese investor JAC Capital and the Road Capital for around $2.7 billion. From here, we can start and originate basically the story of Nexperia. What happened in 2019? So from 2018 to 2019, that was the era where a Chinese investor, Ringtech, was trying to take over, and they accomplished it. In the 2018 reports that I saw, they were targeting around 75% share. But by the time they acquired the company around December 2019, they took over a stake of around 79.98% for about 3.6 billion US dollars. So, what is Wingtech? I will also mention later on. We will dive into their business model as well. But we are talking about the critical leadership shift over here. In 2020, when Wingtech acquired Nexperia at that time, so the idea was that the Dutch labor laws were followed, the CEO was going to remain, also the capacity and all the stuff that we usually see when it comes to acquisitions. But just after 3 months, the CEO stepped down, and the CEO of Wingtech, uh, CEO Mr. Zhang, he actually took over also and became the CEO of Nexperia. So now at this point in time, from that day until today, he is basically the CEO of 2 companies. So he's at Wingtech as well as um, at Nexperia. Now comes the really crucial detail. According to the reports, then nearly 30% of Wingtech's own shares are held by Chinese state funds. And that will become a huge and critical detail while we are discussing this whole scenario. How the industry basically shifted. The first part, the UK and US intervention. The main crisis just didn't happen in a vacuum. There were some signs earlier that we are moving towards this point. The first one was UK, and in UK, the company that we are talking about is Newport Wafer Fab. So in 2021, Nexperia acquired the company for around 63 million pounds. At that time, if I use the currency conversion, it was like 83 million US dollars. And the idea was to expand into compound semiconductors. Right after that acquisition, just about April 2022, there was a letter written to President Biden that we should look into this acquisition because it sounds like we are going to lose. I mean, I'm talking about West. The US was becoming concerned about China's dominance when it comes to semiconductors, and they wanted to have a strict control check to see what's going to happen because, according to their reports, 30% of the shares that were held at that time of FinTech were state linked fund. And sooner after, US actually pressured UK that they have to look into this acquisition, citing security risk as well as danger of technology transfer as well as IP export. So right, now we have covered how US entered the picture. Now we can look at what UK did. So UK, of course, did the first step looking into it. So right after 1 year almost in looking into it, UK actually invoked the National Security and Investment Act to order the sale of the facility. So the idea I haven't included on the slide over here, but they were talking about that Nexperia has to sell around 86% of their shares. What that means is that Nexperia actually announced their acquisition 100% in their press release. So they were really shocked by this decision. What is happening over here? And that time, Nexperia wanted to take the matters to the court, but eventually settled and accepted the decision. And they were essentially forced to sell the entity to a US based Vishay Intertechnology for a sum of around $177 million. When you look at it, they earned around $94 million within just 1.5 years. But it wasn't just about money, it was about the power being shifting. It was the signal what's going to happen in the coming years. So once WingTech was forced to retreat, let's look at what is actually WingTech. So WingTech was the third largest smartphone original device manufacturer or a contract manufacturer by 2023. And they had orders, according to the reports, from Apple, Xiaomi, also the smaller version of Huawei, like the Honor, and also they were making contract manufacturing for Samsung. But in 2024, so by that time, so they had two business lines. So one was the contract manufacturing of cell phones, where they are really big, and as well as they had on the other side the semiconductor facility with Nexperia. So they had two business lines that were going in favor for them. But by December 2024, that was the second strike. What happened was that the US Commerce Department, they blacklisted WingTech technology. And that was the second huge strike, and it showed the signals where the industry is heading. What does it mean for the future for WingTech? The consequence of them, they had to face sanctions and market pressure. And under those pressure, what WingTech basically did was they actually sold off their ODM division. And who did it sell at that time? They sold it to a company called Luxshare Precision for around 635 million US dollars. Why they had to do it was they could not sustain for further very long because their contracts were being canceled. And if such contracts are and such huge clients contracts are going to cancel, they could not sustain. And that's why they just moved towards semiconductor business. That was the only division left for WingTech technology that they can work with it. Now comes the geopolitical avalanche. In June this year, 2025, there are early signs that further sanctions are going to come, but it actually happened in September. Let's look at the timeline. In June 2025, as I mentioned, US was warning Netherlands that there are further sanctions are coming. And with the presence of CEO of Nexperia, Mr. Zhang, if he remains there, there will be consequences. So there were some mild segments and also mild warnings. Now let's look at the 10 days that shaped the automotive supply chain. On 29th of September, US actually sanctioned a trigger. The first one was 50% ownership rule. So I mentioned about the blacklisting of WingTech in 2024. Now the 50% ownership rules mean if a company which is on the blacklist owns 50% of a company that exists in foreign countries, let's say in this case Nexperia with 79% of the share belonging to WingTech, same rules will apply to them. And by 30th September, the Dutch minister actually invoked the Cold War Era Act, Goods Availability Act to seize the office of Nexperia in Nijmegen. It was their actually headquarters. How they presented it, they said that the idea is to protect critical IP and maintain economic security. They had the fears in the letter that they actually wrote down was that they were fearful that critical IP knowledge transfer was happening and they wanted to maintain the economic security of that company, which is quite crucial to the European interest. Now let's look at why they had to step in like that. Because there was some allegations against, there were some reported allegations according to for the CEO, which they cited in their publications. The first one was that the financial conflict. It was reported that CEO Zhang was actually he had recently placed an order of $200 million for wafers at his private company, which he had in Shanghai, for about the company name is Wing Sky Semi, and Nexperia had placed a huge order, almost triple the value, and it was basically going to serve as a scrapping purpose. The second concern was that not only this was happening, the other part was that there was a real move to bring all the technology towards Shanghai in his own factory, and then with the passage of time, the idea is to close down the factories. So these developments actually happened the last few days. So I still have to research on that. But this is basically the story, the official story. On October 4th, China retaliates and they ban all the exports. And by October 10th, force measures take into place. That means that the chip deliveries are now on hold. So three governments, one crisis, 10 days, and a global alarm. What does it mean for the industry? So all the major automotive industries, ACEA, VDA in German, let's say, as well as in US and Japan, JAMA or Alliance for Automotive Innovation, they all triggered warnings that they have few weeks of stocks left, and we are going to see really soon that various auto manufacturers are going to come into a position where their production are going to stop. And because of that, the European OEMs, for example, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Stellantis, and they started cross-checking their supplies. And for Volkswagen, this week is quite crucial because if they do not get the supplies, which doesn't look likely, their production for Golf and Tiguan in Wolfsburg is going to stop. And how many Golf do they produce? The conservative number for this year planning was 250,000 cars. Considering 5 working days, that means 1,000 cars per day. I'm just talking about Golf. Considering that each Golf sells for around 30,000 euros, we are looking at a potential revenue loss of 30 million per day. And can they not find a new supplier? Of course they can, but I've worked in the industry. It's not like you find a supplier like that. It's basically takes months. For the US OEMs, I've seen 4 to 6 months. For the Japanese OEMs, I've even seen 8 to 10 months. Now, let's coming to the conclusion part. We are entering the era where economic security is now outweighing market freedom. The lines between free markets and national interest, or I should say, tech nationalism, are becoming blurry and actually they are overlapping. So, final few words I would say is that the global supply chain is quite efficient. The automotive supply chain is probably the most efficient supply chain that exists right now, but it is not resilient. It is based on just-in-time manufacturing. It is based on cost optimization. And that's why each country is so much interdependent everywhere. Talking about Nexperia, Their all assembly lines are based in Asia. And you can think about this that the new challenge is going to be, is it going to be resilience or is it going to be the cost optimization? And this is my last slide. What is my summary for it? And what do I see in the coming years? That uh, firstly, I talk to a lot of e-mobility colleagues. I have really great community. I've been in contact with them. One thing is always top of the agenda when it comes to e-mobility is that the the Chinese OEMs provide the best value for money when it comes to electric vehicles. And just recently, I've started hearing some voices, like it's very few, it's just at the beginning, and they were mentioning that by purchasing Chinese cars, are we not supporting the regime which is which does not have the same interest as West? Why they were mentioning? Because in September there was the first ever huge parade, military parade, basically from China, North Korea, and Russia. So it was more like a bloc which is against Western. So that was the first part. Second thing was looking at from the geopolitical lens. If such supply chains could be completely stopped, what does it mean? Because the people are probably going to be coming into a situation where they will get lower pays because the companies might cut down on their production. So there will be some sort of negative sentiment against. Of course, it did not happen in isolation. There were a lot of pushback from Western side as well. But what I'm trying to say is that maybe the customers are going to hold back on purchasing Chinese electric vehicles. Not right now, perhaps in 2, 3, 4, if this events happens frequently, maybe after 2, 3, 5 years, we are going to see this trend. Secondly, um, we are going to see more tech nationalism. Basically, the European OEMs are probably going to look more into it and they are going to scrutinize Chinese OEMs because BYD plans to open a lot of production plants in Europe and probably they will face some scrutiny or additional scrutiny, and also other OEMs. And finally, from the Chinese perspective, they will be looking at this situation thinking that we can invest so much money in the West, we can avoid tariffs by that, but we do not have the security that we will not be countered like that in the future. So let's see how the market is going to shape up. But I think if if such events are going to happen multiple times, the scale plans of Chinese OEMs would look different in a couple of years. Let me know what are your thoughts, and thank you so much if you see this. It was my first ever live stream. It was not the perfect one. I'm pretty sure about it. But if you like it, let me know in the comments or just send me a message. What should I improve? And I will do it. And next week, I will be doing a live webinar trying to focus more on the EV charging infrastructure of Germany. And also, you can subscribe to my free newsletter at etechvolution.com. I break down EV charging trends as well as automotive trends. See you next time. Take care. I'm Asif. Bye bye.